When you think of global power, you probably picture aircraft carrier strike groups patrolling the ocean. You imagine tanks crossing a border, or you picture world leaders shaking hands at a high-stakes political summit. But what if I told you the real war for global dominance in the 21st century isn't being fought with gunpowder or steel? What if it's being fought invisibly, with lines of code, with encrypted data packets, and with obscure financial messages that flash across the globe in milliseconds? You hear these acronyms in the news every day, especially when the subject is U.S. sanctions or the rise of China. Politicians debate them. Economists warn about them. SWIFT, CIPS. To most people, these terms sound abstract, technical, and frankly, boring, but they are, without question, the most important battlefield you've never heard of. These systems are the financial plumbing of the world. They are the hidden pipes that connect every bank, every nation, and every business. They determine who can trade, who gets paid, and who is left out in the cold. They decide who truly controls the global economy. For 50 years, one system, SWIFT, has ruled this world with absolute, unchallenged dominance. Now a new system, China's CIPS, is challenging that rule. But this is not another hyperbolic news report predicting the dollar's collapse tomorrow. This is a classroom. My role today is simple: to be your professor, to turn off the noise and simply explain. We are going to demystify these systems with clear, simple analogies. We will answer the key questions. What is CIPS? How is it fundamentally different from SWIFT? And most importantly, is this showdown, SWIFT versus CIPS, a real, credible threat to U.S. dollar dominance? Or is it just a paper tiger? What is financial plumbing, the reign of SWIFT? Before we can compare these two giants, we must first understand exactly what it is we are talking about. Forget the banks and the politics for just 1 minute. Think about your house. You have faucets, showers, and toilets. But the most important part of your house is the one you never see: the plumbing, the pipes hidden in the walls that connect everything. If those pipes break, your entire house stops functioning. The global economy is the same. The banks are the faucets. The financial plumbing is the vast, complex network of systems that connects them all. And for half a century, the king of that plumbing system has been SWIFT. SWIFT stands for the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Now, I am going to tell you the single most important fact you must understand to follow this entire debate. SWIFT is not a bank. SWIFT does not hold any money. SWIFT does not move, touch, or settle any money. So what does it do? The clearest analogy is this: SWIFT is a highly secure Gmail for banks. It is quite literally just a messaging system. It provides a standardized, trusted language that allows banks to talk to each other. Let's look at the data. According to SWIFT's own reports, it connects over 11,500 institutions. It operates in more than 200 countries and territories. And in 2024, it was handling an average of over 53 million messages every single day. Let's make this real with a simple example for our audience. Imagine a farmer in Iowa. Let's call him Bob. Bob needs a specialized replacement part for his John Deere tractor. He finds the part at a supplier in Stuttgart, Germany. The part costs $5,000. Bob goes to his local bank, say a Bank of America branch in Des Moines. Bank of America does not put $5,000 in a suitcase and fly it to Germany. Instead, they log into their terminal and send a SWIFT message. That message, using a standard code called MT103, is a secure instruction. It says, "Hello, Deutsche Bank in Stuttgart. This is Bank of America. We are sending you $5,000 for our customer, Bob, to pay your customer, the German parts supplier. Please credit their account." That's it. That's all SWIFT does. It's the send button. This immediately raises the most important question of all. If SWIFT is just an email, where does the actual money move? This, ladies and gentlemen, is where the true power of the US dollar comes from. Because Bob and the German supplier agreed to trade in US dollars, the SWIFT message is only step one. Step two is the settlement, the actual movement of the funds. To do this, both Bank of America and Deutsche Bank must have an account at a third bank, a correspondent bank, that can handle US dollars. And almost without exception, that bank is located in New York City. Let's say they both use JP Morgan Chase. After Deutsche Bank receives the SWIFT message, JP Morgan Chase in New York actually moves the money. It debits $5,000 from Bank of America's account and credits $5,000 to Deutsche Bank's account. The transaction is now settled. This correspondent banking system is the other half of the financial plumbing, and it means the United States government effectively has 2 points of control over the global economy. One, it has immense political influence over the SWIFT messaging system, and two, it has direct, sovereign control over the New York banks that settle the vast majority of all U.S. dollar transactions. This is why U.S. sanctions are the most feared economic weapon on earth. Washington can ask SWIFT to cut off a country's banks, making them mute, or it can simply order the New York banks to freeze that country's transactions, making them paralyzed. For 50 years, this system was the undisputed, impenetrable fortress of U.S. dollar dominance. The challenger. What is CIPS? This brings us to the challenger. Why would China spend over a decade and billions of dollars to build a brand new, incredibly complex system from scratch? If SWIFT works for everyone, why create CIPS? The answer is simple. Because SWIFT doesn't work for everyone. It works perfectly as long as your country's foreign policy aligns with Washington's. The moment it doesn't, that system becomes a weapon pointed directly at your economy. For Beijing, this wasn't a theoretical problem. They watched what happened to Iran. They watched what happened in 2014 when the U.S. first sanctioned Russia over Crimea, sparking debate about a SWIFT cutoff. They watched again during the 2018 U.S.-China trade war. And then in 2022, they watched the financial nuclear option finally be used. When Russia was disconnected from SWIFT, it was a profound Sputnik moment for Beijing. It proved beyond all doubt that relying on U.S.-controlled financial plumbing was an existential national security risk. The motivation was no longer about prestige or slowly building the UN's influence. The motivation was survival. They had to build an alternative to SWIFT, a system that was sanction-proof. And that system is CIPS, the Cross-Border International Payment System. It was officially launched on October 8, 2015, backed by China's central bank, the People's Bank of China. Now here is the core insight of this entire video. This is the one thing you must understand. CIPS is not just a Chinese copy of SWIFT. It was strategically designed to be something fundamentally different and far more dangerous to the old order. Let's go back to our analogy. We established that SWIFT is just Gmail. It's only a messenger. The settlement happens separately in New York. CIPS, on the other hand, was built to be an all-in-one system. CIPS is Gmail plus FedEx plus the bank, all rolled into one. It is a combined system. It has its own secure messaging system, just like SWIFT, but it also has its own settlement system. It is designed to clear and settle transactions directly, in real time, on its own books. This is a revolutionary concept. Here is how it works technically, but simplified. CIPS has two types of members. First, you have direct participants. These are major global banks that have actually opened an account inside the CIPS system in China. Second, you have indirect participants. These are the thousands of smaller banks around the world that connect to CIPS through one of those direct participants. As of early 2025, CIPS has grown from just a handful of banks to over 1,700 participants from all over the world. Now let's run that same trade scenario again, but this time in the new parallel system. A Russian energy company wants to buy mining equipment from a Brazilian manufacturer. Both of their banks are members of CIPS. They agree on a price not in US dollars, but in Chinese Yuan. The Russian bank sends a payment instruction through the CIPS system. The instruction is received. And the settlement, the actual movement of money, happens instantaneously inside the CIPS system. The yuan moves from the Russian bank's CIPS account to the Brazilian bank's CIPS account. The transaction is done. Let's pause and think about what just happened. A multi-million-dollar international trade between Russia and Brazil was just completed. No US dollars were used. No bank in New York was involved. No SWIFT message was ever sent. And therefore, the U.S. Treasury, which once had a God's eye view of global trade, is completely blind. It cannot be tracked, it cannot be blocked, and it cannot be sanctioned. This is the strategic purpose of the China financial system. It is designed to create sanction-proof global payments. Module 4, Part 3, the showdown, SWIFT via CIPS. So now that we understand how they work, let's put them head-to-head. This is the objective fact-check showdown of SWIFT versus CIPS. Let's be the calm professor and look at the data. Metric number 1, scale and volume. This is the most obvious comparison, and it is a total mismatch. SWIFT, as we noted, is the undisputed Goliath. It has over 11,500 member institutions. It handles over 53 million messages per day. Its daily transaction value is measured in the trillions of dollars. Now let's look at CIPS. As of early 2025, CIPS has just over 1,700 participants. But look at its growth. In 2023, CIPS processed 123 trillion yuan for the entire year. That's about 17.1 trillion US dollars. But in 2024, driven by sanctioned nations flocking to the system, that volume exploded by over 42% to 175 trillion yuan, or about 24.5 trillion US dollars for the year. The growth is staggering, but the scale is still tiny in comparison. To put it in perspective, SWIFT's daily volume is a significant fraction of what CIPS handles in an entire year. So for our analogy, if SWIFT is the entire Pacific Ocean, CIPS is a very large, very deep, and very fast-growing lake. Verdict 1. In terms of scale, CIPS is not even in the same league. Metric number 2, currency. This is the most critical factor. SWIFT technically is currency neutral. You can send a SWIFT message about a trade in euros, yen, Canadian dollars, or anything else. But in practice, it is a US dollar-centric system. According to the latest 2024-2025 data from the Bank for International Settlements, BIS, the US dollar is on one side of 89.2% of all global foreign exchange trades. Nearly 90 cents of every 100 traded in the world is a US dollar. CIPS is the opposite. It is not currency neutral. It is a 100% Chinese yuan-centric system. Its entire purpose is to promote and settle trades in the yuan. This is the system's single greatest bottleneck. CIPS cannot truly challenge SWIFT unless the yuan can truly challenge the dollar. And right now it can't. According to the latest IMF data from the end of 2024, the yuan accounts for only 2.18% of the world's allocated foreign reserves. Compare that to the US dollar, which, despite all the talk of its demise, still makes up 57.8% of all global reserves. Verdict 2. The dominance of the US dollar remains the ultimate firewall protecting SWIFT. Metric number 3, function and weakness. This is where the story gets complicated. SWIFT's greatest strength is its greatest weakness, its universality. Because everyone is on it, it has become a political tool. As we discussed, every time the US uses SWIFT for sanctions, it is a powerful political statement, but it's also a powerful advertisement for CIPS. It pushes nations away. Now look at CIPS. Its greatest strength is also its greatest weakness, its independence. Because it's a closed system controlled by Beijing, it's a political tool for the China financial system. Other countries like India or Brazil are wary. They have to ask themselves, do we want to escape US financial dominance just to walk into Chinese financial dominance? Furthermore, the yuan's value is tightly managed by the Chinese government. It is not a freely convertible currency. International investors are nervous about putting billions into a system where Beijing could, theoretically, change the rules or trap their money overnight. Verdict 3. Both systems are politically compromised. It's just a question of which political power you trust more. The verdict, a real threat or a paper tiger? So we come back to our central question. After looking at the data, is CIPS a real threat, or is it just a paper tiger? The answer, like most things in economics, is it depends on what question you're asking. If you are asking, will CIPS replace SWIFT as the global standard? The answer for the foreseeable future is an emphatic no. It is a paper tiger. The US dollar's dominance, at 57.8% of global reserves, is just too overwhelming. The world's financial markets are built on the trust, liquidity, and legal transparency of the U.S. system. Even Chinese companies still do most of their international trade in U.S. dollars. CIPS cannot replace SWIFT until the Yuan replaces the dollar, and that is not happening anytime soon. But if you are asking a different, more strategic question, is CIPS a real threat to America's ability to impose sanctions and control the global financial order? The answer is an absolute, undeniable yes. You are looking at the wrong goal. The strategic goal of CIPS is not replacement. The goal is fragmentation. It is built to create a parallel system. It is an escape route for a specific club of nations, like the BRICS and other global South countries, who want to trade with each other without needing Washington's permission. And at that job, it is becoming wildly successful. It functionally makes U.S. sanctions ineffective against any country that China wishes to trade with. If Russia, Iran, or Venezuela can sell their oil to China and India and get paid in yuan through CIPS, then the core weapon of U.S. foreign policy is neutralized. This is the real threat. It's not the dramatic collapse of the U.S. dollar. It's the slow, quiet, technical erosion of U.S. power. Conclusion and resonance point. So in the end, the great battle of SWIFT versus CIPS is not really about which system is bigger. It's about which system has a different function. SWIFT remains the universal public highway, but it's a highway where the U.S. government operates the toll booths and can shut down any exit. CIPS is a new private highway. It's smaller, has fewer lanes, and only one type of car is allowed, the Yuan. But it was built specifically to bypass all of Washington's toll booths. This is the clear beginning of a two-system world. The global financial plumbing that has held the world together for 50 years is now branching off. And as these two systems diverge, it leads us to a final, thought-provoking question. As the world splits into competing financial blocks, the real question is no longer which system is bigger, but which system will your children and grandchildren be forced to use? But CIPS is just the set of pipes. The real revolution might be the water that China wants to send through them, the digital Yuan. In our next video, we'll explain what the ECNY is and why central banks around the world are watching it so very closely.